Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, good evening, friends. If we can pop up here we are. Welcome to this Sunday night, May 31st, 2015 edition of Nightcast. Opening story tonight, friends, we go to Germany, where Angela Merkel on the right was uncharacteristically outspoken during her meeting with David Cameron. There was a lot of talk of shuttle diplomacy this week and of David Cameron's whistle-stop tour of Europe. But in the end, the British Prime Minister actually only popped into 4 European capitals between Thursday morning and Friday afternoon. So, did the trip merit the fanfare? Was it a success? Well, when the most powerful woman in the world, according to the BBC, that is Angela Merkel, responds to the Prime Minister's wish list for a different kind of EU, where there's, quote, a will, there's a way, and says that, yes, treaty change might indeed be possible. That sounds like success to him. The European tour this week, or actually the end of last week, this is a story I'm running for you that ran Saturday. So the European tour that ended last week served a definite purpose in the long run-up to the UK general election. David Cameron and his ministers irritated a fair few, by grandstanding and performing to the Eurosceptic gallery at home while abroad on U.S. business. I'm sorry, I meant to say EU business. This was a chance to try to repair burned bridges. Before the nitty-gritty and sometimes probably nasty process of negotiating a new EU relationship for Britain, this was a chance for the Prime Minister to say to other leaders, look, this is not about the UK versus the rest of Europe. We do have a lot in common. And friends, the capture with this picture that's part of this story, this opening story for tonight, the caption reads, Poland, the emerging new EU power, was one of Mr. Cameron's 4 tour stops last week. What Europe's leaders to feel from Britain as it seeks to change the EU is that this is a process, not a dictate. In this pre-negotiation stage, tone is as important as content. So, in Paris, Mr. Cameron carefully listed issues where France and Britain stand side by side, while in the Netherlands he described the country as an old friend and like-minded ally. Mr. Cameron needs other EU leaders on side to pass meaningful reforms. Last week's 4 tour stops were carefully chosen. The Netherlands and Germany are generally UK-friendly, open to more competitiveness, a stronger single market, and less red tape. France is trickier, Brother Reuben. But alongside Germany, a traditional EU heavyweight, and France is, and therefore a must-visit, while Poland, on the other hand, is the emerging new EU power. It's Britain's ally over tough sanctions against Russia, but as we saw in the rather uncomfortable meeting with Prime Minister Kopacz on Friday, Poland will be a fierce opponent of scrapping migrant benefits. On his travels, David Cameron found a widespread appetite for change. The tricky part will be persuading other EU leaders that his way is the best way. But when it comes to the EU's most powerful country, Germany, the details of this trip were less important. Chancellor Merkel, ever the pragmatist, has an eye on the big picture, Europe on the world stage. She worries that the EU, without the British economy, the British military, and British diplomatic expertise, is weaker and more fragmented in the face of a ruthlessly ambitious China, and in particular, having grown up in communist East Germany, of a newly aggressive Russia just next door. Angela Merkel, normally so risk-averse, was uncharacteristically outspoken, standing side by side with David Cameron. Quote, "I want to find a solution," she said to him, "and generally in the EU, when Germany speaks, others follow." Now, the three in this story, friends, three of the characteristics that were mentioned relate to three certain things that Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong would point out we should be watching for out of the EU when it has an economic union, a political union, and a military union. And all of these things were some of the things mentioned in this story that I just read to you. Friends, I want to go next. Now, I'm recuperating tonight from an injury that happened to my eye on Friday, and I'm going to be okay, but I've had to do a lot of taking care of that eye. And I notice I got some of our lighting off tonight, but actually I see it over there. One of our lights has fallen over against an obstacle, so it's throwing our lighting in the studio off some. But our next story, I got a call from, well, there's part of my problem too. I got to switch this bank here. Let me do that while we're here. Okay. Because I want to change that screen behind us and not put it up until I tell you what's going on. I got a call from one of the members of the church I belonged to for a good 4 decades, and generically I now call that the Church of God Scattered Abroad, as Acts 8 calls it. We're in a similar situation to what happened in Acts 8, beginning in verse 1, but picking up in verse 4. Happened back in the Ephesian era. But I got a call from one of our brethren that mentioned that there's some unusual, poisonous as a snake spider being flown from South America into the United States. Now, I'm going to see if I can get that brother on the phone while I play you this video. Let's see. This is actually from a news story just 2 days ago, related to to what I was just mentioning to you in a certain way. One of the world's most dangerous spiders has been caught in a Tamworth warehouse. A Brazilian wandering spider was spotted beside pallets that had arrived from South America. And this relates in a way, friends, because this thing that's supposed to be flying into the United States right now is a South American spider. It arrived from South America by Lee Hilton, who works for shower and tap manufacturer Bristol. He said, "I told my friend to watch it and not let it out of his sight. Chemicals in the venom make the brain think the pain is even worse than it really is," said an expert, James Shipp from the Stratford Butterfly Farm. The spider was taken to Bristol Zoo, where staff said it was probably the largest seen in the UK. Let's go to the video on that.
Lee Hilton, warehouse worker, friend of spiders. Yesterday morning, he spotted one he hadn't seen before in a pile of pallets from South America.
I thought it was a wolf spider to start off with, which you do see them around in this country, but I just noticed that it had some spots on its legs, and I noticed no wolf spiders don't have that. I told my friend to watch it and not let it out of his sight, and I ran into the warehouse and got a plastic tub and just put the tub by the side of it, coaxed it into the tub, put the lid on the tub and sellotaped the lid on, and that was it really.
Experts at Bristol Zoo have confirmed it was a Brazilian wandering spider like this one, only bigger. In fact, the largest ever found in the UK. Most people would have run a mile.
No, I like stuff like that. It's just a bit more sort of thing. Like.
Unlike the Brazilian tarantula here, which is quite slow on its feet and delivers a bite that's like a bee stings, the Brazilian wandering spider is really fast on his feet and has a bite like no other.
So this particular venom has got chemicals in it that makes the brain think that the pain is even worse than it really is. So you would have about 6 hours worth of pain, and if you weren't able to get anti-venom within those 6 hours, it can lead to paralysis, and in some cases it could lead to death.
Back in Tamworth, and Lee's reflecting on his close encounter.
It's just exciting for me. I've enjoyed it. It's a nice thing to have, like. Cross it off my bucket list.
Sarah Falkland, BBC Midlands Today in Tamworth.
Okay, and friends, I was trying to get Sam Smitherman, who called me from Vance, about the story about spiders being flown into the United States from South America. Maybe we'll find some more news on that by tomorrow night, or maybe we'll try to get Sam on the line tomorrow. Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili has been appointed governor of Ukraine's southern Odessa region. Announcing the surprise move in the Black Sea port of Odessa, President Petro Poroshenko said Mr. Saakashvili had been granted Ukrainian citizenship. Analysis. I got more news story on it, but let me break and give you this analysis by David Stern. It says, the complete surprise of Mikhail Saakashvili's appointment as Odessa governor has left a large number of political observers at a loss for explanation. President Petro Poroshenko's reasons will become clearer with time, but at the moment, many are struggling to see the strategy behind naming a former leader of another country to run a provincial government. Saakashvili is a political outsider with few ties to the Odessa region and comes with a reputation for divisiveness and a high level of self-involvement. But he is also pro-Western, pro-reform, and apparently very loyal to Mr. Poroshenko, which will come in handy if he takes on local corruption and vested interest as Mr. Poroshenko apparently wants. Friends, I'm reading to you this article by David Stern. The move could be a stroke of genius on Mr. Poroshenko's part or a blunder of breathtaking magnitude, says Mr. Stern. At the very least, it points to his lack of choice among homegrown candidates. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev later made sarcastic comments on the appointment, describing it as a Chapiteau show, in a reference to a popular Russian farcical comedy. Has been highly critical of Mr. Saakashvili since Georgia and Russia fought a brief war in 2008. Unlike Ukraine's eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions, Odessa has not been hit by the fighting between government forces and pro-Russian rebels. However, tensions in the strategic port remain high after clashes between pro- and anti-government protesters on May 2 last year left more than 40 people dead. The majority of those who died were pro-Russian activists who perished in a fire in a trade union building. Investigations into what caused the blaze are continuing. The Ukrainian government, Western leaders, and NATO all say there is clear evidence that Russia is helping the rebels in the east with heavy weapons and soldiers. Independent experts echo that accusation. Moscow denies it, insisting that any Russians serving with the rebels are volunteers. More than 6,000 people have been killed in fighting in eastern Ukraine that began in April last year, April 2014, when rebels seized parts of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. This followed Russia's annexation of the Crimea Peninsula. Here's a map that goes with the story I was just reading to you, so you can see where is Luhansk and Donetsk and Kiev and Odessa and Crimea, all pictured here in this map, areas that we were mentioning in the story that we just covered. Now, next to Egypt. Egypt faces an outcry over the rise of death penalties. The BBC's correspondent in Cairo, Sally Nabil, explains and explores.
This gathering is missing an important family member, Mom, and there is a chance she might be absent for good. 50-year-old Samia has been sentenced to death. She is the only female defendant among more than 180 men. All of them were given the maximum penalty. They were charged with killing at least 11 police officers after a number of Islamists stormed into the Kurdasa police station in southern Cairo in 2013. Samia's son, Muhammad, does not trust the judiciary. These verdicts are politically motivated, he tells me. There is no law in Egypt. I feel very angry.
Nearly 2 years ago, this police station here in Kurdasa was a battleground between security forces and Islamists. Now, it's nothing but a burned skeleton structure. The families of the defendants believe the Kurdasa case is politicized, but there are others who have a different view.
Nagla's husband was a police officer killed in the clashes. Not only did he lose his life, but his body was mutilated. Each one of these criminals should be hanged 100 times, she says. Executions are not enough. Their dead bodies should be mutilated too. Hundreds of death sentences were passed over the past year against supporters of the ousted Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. The verdicts can still be appealed. But Amnesty International says this penalty is a tool the authorities use to purge political opposition. Judges insist they are independent.
The judiciary has nothing to do with politics. Judges never take sides. They just follow the law.
As this controversy goes on, a new death sentence might be on the way for Morsi and some leading members of his Muslim Brotherhood group. The court requested the death penalty and awaits a religious ratification from the country's highest Muslim cleric. Sally Nabil, BBC News, Cairo.
Okay, friends, and we have news tonight. I told you we would get to involving the United States. And it is an urgent surveillance debate as President Obama has urged Congress to prevent surveillance legislation expiring, as John Sopel reports.
We've been here before, haven't we? There have been all sorts of battles in the past over getting various budgets passed and whether bits of government will be shut down. But not on national security. National security hasn't been taken to the brink like this. And essentially, as you say, if this legislation isn't renewed by midnight, then the servers concerning the bulk collection of mobile phone data will have to be shut down. They'll have to stop the roving wiretaps on terror suspects. They will stop being able to track so-called lone wolves who the United States fear. Now, as you say, Barack Obama says we mustn't surrender tools that are useful in the fight. But the fight is being led by a Republican libertarian Senator, Rand Paul, who is also a presidential hopeful. And if you're a presidential hopeful, one of the things you need is publicity, and lots of it, and he is getting it by the bucket load as a result of the stand that he is taking tonight.
All right, friends, that's it on that. That's it for our report for this Sunday night edition of Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Monday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.